Hi everybody, it is River with by Jove Astrology, and today I have a tarot reading that is all about the Mars-Pluto opposition. So basically what I've done is I've pulled 4 cards, and these cards are going to represent, I've got 2 that represent each of the planets, and then 2 for the lesson that we are experiencing through this transit. But before I talk about the cards, I want to talk about the planets themselves and their meanings and why it's important to take this time to try to understand what we've been experiencing. So we have Mars and Pluto. And so Mars is our impulses and reactions. It's the things that come up when we're threatened or we're excited. It's what drives us to go after what we desire or to assert ourselves over something or someone. And Pluto is our secrets and shadows, things that we wish to hide from the world. It's our survival instincts, the often unconscious actions that we take to protect ourselves and those closest to us. And so basically, since late October last year, these 2 planets have been in opposition 3 times. So basically, an opposition happens when 2 planets are 180 degrees apart, meaning they're on opposite sides of the zodiac axis, like Cancer and Capricorn. And so this opposition shows up in our lives through the conflicts that we have. So these conflicts may be internal, something we're struggling with 2 halves of ourselves. You know, if you imagine the zodiac chart, right? Like we've got the 1st and the 7th. So you might be struggling with, you know, literally yourself and others, or it might be how you show up when you are by yourself and how you are when you are in relationship with other people. And also, it might be the systems of power that rule us that we've been experiencing a lot of conflict because Pluto is 1, it's a big generational planet, and 2, especially with Aquarius, that is a really collective sign. And so it has a lot to do with how we are as a collective and those systems that we are a part of. And it's similar to Capricorn, was also systems as well, but it's a different take with Aquarius. So basically, we've had like I was saying, we've had 3 oppositions, right? So I'm going to go a little bit into the dates and then talk about the signs that they've been in and what the meaning is behind them, and then we'll get into the cards. So the first, basically what happens in astrology is when planets are about 3 degrees away from each other, we'll start to feel that energy. So what I'm going to give us first is the date that it was exact, and then there's going to be an applying range and a separation range before and after. So for the first exact hit, that was on November 3rd of 2024. And that was when Mars was at 29 degrees of Cancer and 45 minutes, and it was opposite Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn and 45 minutes. And so when we started to feel the tension of this opposition was a few days before on October 28th. That's when it entered the range, and then it left the range a few weeks later on November 18th. And so think back to that time period about what conflicts that you are experiencing again within yourselves or the people or systems of your life. And so we need to kind of think also, you know, what is it at that time? And this was in the last degrees, right? The very last degrees of Pluto and Capricorn in its very long journey. What was it that Pluto and Capricorn wanted us to transform? So what was it, clarifying again, what was it that Pluto in Capricorn was asking us to transform or change? Because, you know, I did in the little snippet talk about how Pluto is our survival instincts, but also something that is used to talk about Pluto a lot is the word transformation. And often when we think of transformation, the first image that comes to mind is a butterfly breaking out of its chrysalis. But often when we're so focused on that moment of the butterfly flying in the air, we don't really think about everything that came before it, and that the process of actually it turning in to a butterfly. And so I was reading about this the other day. It was fascinating, but it's like inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar actually is dissolving itself. It has to dissolve all of its organs and every part of it in order to transform and change. Right? So Pluto is this gruesome reality. Again, you could liken this to when, those awkward years of being a teenager and how your body starts to change and develop, and you have these wants and desires and needs that are in a sense horrifying, but it's pushing you towards becoming your own person, to pushing yourself apart and separating from who you were as a child and who you were as a family and becoming independent. And so when we look at Pluto's structure, it is that transformation, it's that change, right? So I'm going to read a little bit about what I wrote in my Substack about Pluto and Capricorn and what its meaning has been for us. And so basically, during the transit of Pluto and Capricorn, Pluto has been digesting the structures of our world and the power and the control that comes with upholding them. So, as I said, Pluto is our survival instincts, our fight, our flight. And in Capricorn, we saw the stark truth of this. Many will do whatever it takes in their climb towards the top. But we also saw movements spring up across the world fighting these injustices. Capricorn energy can embolden people to work tirelessly hard. Its message being reality won't change unless you do something about it yourself. There's no wishing for someone to come and save you. So, in that ending point in October, November, these were these really big themes that were playing in our lives and playing in the world around us, right? And so the structures in society and the way that things have been set up have been crumbling and falling. That was all happening in that time period of last year, right? And so we had that energy on one side and we had the Cancer energy on the other side. And we can kind of, again, think of this energy as, if we wanted to put it in simpler terms, of Capricorn is like the parent and Cancer is like the child, or you could even think of Cancer as the mother and Capricorn as the father. Not that these signs should be gendered at all, but there's sort of this emotional separation and this toughness versus this softness and this protectiveness. And so that's the energy of, the Cancer and the Mars pushing against the Pluto. So that was what we were feeling in that transit, just a little bit. And then we had this shift. And also, too, I should say, during that time period, a lot with this Mars-Pluto dynamic, we're really looking again at structures of power, control, how we deal with anger, our expression of masculinity, and defensiveness, and what battles we feel are worth fighting for. Then we had a shift to, let me get the dates for that. So then again, at the end of the year, around Christmas time, is when we're hitting the next 3-degree range, applying range. And it goes exact on January 2nd, 2025. And that's when Mars is at 1 degree of Leo in 8 minutes, opposite Pluto and Aquarius at the same degrees. And so this is now where our story is really kind of coming and holding root. And this is a retrograde Mars, I should say, by the way. And so then it leaves this 3-degree separation range at around January 11th. So this time we're looking at Pluto and asking about, what does Pluto want us to transform? Pluto and Aquarius want us to transform. And so in Aquarius, we are really looking at humanity as a whole. If we imagine that, we are all one large community, what does Pluto in Aquarius say about this? What does it want us to transform, right? The way that things have been structured. But in Capricorn, the structures were very much, the physicality of the places, whereas in Aquarius, it's our ideas, it's our thoughts, it's the way that we communicate. Remember, this is an air sign, right? And so we're entering, we've been in it, but rapidly increasing this age of information. And so information is power. And who holds all this information is the one that holds power. And so Aquarius is really asking us to look at these power dynamics when it comes to this information and restructure who's having power in the dynamics of this. Whereas Mars and Leo wants us to act with bravery, with courage, with heart, over the things that we feel passionate about the things that make us feel proud of ourselves, and it's a very expressive energy. And so this is the dynamic now between Mars and Pluto, is that of Leo, the warm, hot, fiery sign, and the cool, distant, airy sign of Aquarius. And the last transit that we were feeling between the two was on April 19th. It entered the 3-degree range. On April 26th, we went exact. Mars was 3 degrees of Leo in 48 minutes, opposite Pluto at 3 degrees of Aquarius in 48 minutes. And then on May 4th is when we are going to leave the 3-degree separation range. So that the last transit is what we are really focusing on today. I just wanted to give a little bit of background information. Honestly, I could have gone much deeper, but I don't want us to get off track. If I start talking about astrology or tarot, it's just, I can go on and on. But let's get into the tarot reading. So I really thought, I've been thinking about this lately and for my own personal practice, but I wanted to share with you guys today of just how I use tarot cards to understand astrological transits. Because I'm someone who, I'm really analytical, I think a lot, I want to put things down in words, and sometimes I can spend hours and hours and days on writing something, and I sort of get in this really stuck analytical place. And I don't always have things flow to me naturally. And so the thing that I love about the cards is just images alone can spark meaning, but also too, there's something outside of myself that is coming in with the message. And this is a really easy way for me to listen to it and share it with you all. So for this, I just have 2 simple questions, and one is just which card best represents this planet during this transit. And the second is what lesson are we collectively learning through this transit? So for the first 2 cards, I have the Fool, put these there for a minute, and the 4 of Cups. So I asked what card best represents Pluto during this transit, and I got the Fool. And what card best represents Mars and Leo in this transit, and I got the 4 of Cups. Seeing this Fool is really making me think about, first of all, we're at the very beginning of our 19-year journey with Pluto in Aquarius. So this is something where I feel, we've had this talk about the age of Aquarius for so long and what it might mean collectively. And there's been all this big talk about how it's going to be this amazing thing. But also on the other side of that, there's so much fear when there are these really big astrological shifts, especially when it just feels like year after year, there's so many frightening things happening. And so a lot of us collectively, we're at the start of this journey of something new and fresh, and yet it's frightening. You can see in this deck that this Fool isn't as open-hearted or courageous in their journey, as the Fool and some other decks. And just looking at the robes here, I have a couple different things coming in. One is just like I had talked about before with the butterfly and the metamorphosis. This looks like the outside shell of a chrysalis. Even the person underneath, like the shape and the way that they are is kind of caterpillar-y like. You can really imagine that. I feel like I can really see this cocoon, not cocoon, chrysalis on the outside of them. But you can see how tattered and worn it is. And even though they're at their start of the journey, it's like it's time to cast off this shell, right? To open ourselves up and to develop into something new. But also too, just thinking the way about snakes and how they shed their skin. And so there's something here that is ready to be shed or cast away at the start of this journey. We'll come back to that. And the Four of Cups for our Mars and Leo energy coming through. So, we've been experiencing a Mars retrograde. Now it's direct, but it's just finally starting to head back to the degrees that it was when it first started. And so it feels like, normally Mars is this really direct, fiery energy. And yet for some time now, we've kind of been forced in this position of more receptivity, but also just being more internalized, having to really think about the things that we want to do because we've not really had the freedom or the mobility to do them. And so it feels like there's been some stagnant energy that's been here. And now Spirit is coming in with this direct energy of this movement. And yet a lot of us are still in this kind of, we're like, oh, we've been sitting for so long. Maybe, this person has fallen asleep. Maybe their legs have fallen asleep. And so there's some awareness there that is kind of coming through, but we don't have it fully yet. Can see those two cards coming in and the way, they're on opposites, but they're not totally opposite. There's something here that is coming through, but I'm going to come back to that. Let's look at these two cards and then we'll return. So for the lesson that we are currently learning through this transit, we have the Hermit and we have the Ace of Swords. So the Hermit is that energy of which really matches with the Four of Cups. It's that going inside, connecting to ourselves, listening to our inner voice, to our guide, finding this part of development. And the Ace of Swords is like that aha moment. It feels like, like with the Hermit and even with the Four of Cups, it's like when you take that time to quietly be alone by yourself and just have that space, a thought, an idea suddenly might burst through. And it comes through with such clarity. And that Mars energy that now we're really starting to feel again, to push out, is really like, when we have that moment of clarity, for example, of like, this is the thing that I want to do, or this is the direction that I want to go, or this is the belief that I have that's worth fighting for. This is the thing, again, with swords, thinking about like, what are you fighting for? What battle is important to you in this moment? And that's just bursting through in this lesson. It's something that in these last couple months, we've really thought and felt long and hard about, and there's a certain clarity. And now that we have it, I don't feel like there's holding back, or like we shouldn't be holding back. And to tie that in with these cards and just taking a moment to look at the similarities that are coming through, it really feels like the Hermit is this elevated version of the Fool, or another face of the Fool, where the Fool is afraid to go on the journey and the Hermit is happily on his way. And they both have the sticks, but you can see that these robes have been cast for these new comfortable ones, that the sort of dead path here that's dried away is coming for a more smooth path here. He's got shoes, right? And also too, he's not afraid, or this person is not afraid on their journey, right? And with the Ace of Swords and the Four of Cups, just seeing the similarity of, you know, the tree behind with the leaves coming in, kind of hanging over the top, looks similar. And we have the Spirit holding this idea and Spirit holding this cup, the gold of the crown and the gold of the cup. I just love looking at the cards and seeing, you know, what story is coming through. And what is this lesson that we are collectively learning through this transit? Just also thinking about how, with, again, all this information overload that we've been having, there is a big part of us too that I know I have, and I know a lot of people have been in this sort of retreating moment where if we're not looking at the news, it's kind of like we're hoping it's not going to affect us. But more and more and more, we're seeing that we can't necessarily just only retreat in our shells. Obviously, it's good to have those moments, but at the end of the day, really thinking about Pluto and Aquarius and what it means when we put the power into the hands of the people and we work collectively together against the systems, and we stand for the things that we believe in, that we see to be fair, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be on this really big scale, though I do think that's important to see how, you know, the macrocosm affects the microcosm. But even in our own personal worlds, right? We cannot always go off and be on our own. We need to stand up and fight and protect the things that we love and we care about. And also too, like, not to say that we're always going to be on the side of justice or always to be on the side of things that are right or wrong. Obviously with Pluto, sometimes there can be some black or white sort of ways of viewing, but also to understand, like, it's important, you know, with communication, it's not only about talking, but it's also about being receptive and listening and understanding. And again, maybe taking that time to, okay, I can't really take in what you're saying, but I'm going to come back to you later and we're going to have that clear discussion. So just really think about the conflicts that you've been experiencing in your life and how it might relate to these cards. I invite you to pause the video or to take a picture and just meditate and think on these cards as this transit sort of comes to an end, because on on May 4th, that is when we are leaving the 3 degrees of separation and this transit comes to a close, although obviously we'll still be experiencing the intensity of Pluto depending on where it is in your chart and feeling the forward moving of Mars. So I hope you have enjoyed today's reading. It was something different, and I'm thinking about making this a series and trying this with other transits. So I hope that was clear. Sometimes when I've got all that information coming in, it feels like a lot to process and put out, and it's definitely a different experience than, you know, when I sit down to write for Substack. But it was a fun experiment, and I hope you enjoyed it, and have a great day.